My guest this week is Jaclyn Lautz. She is the COO of a company called ivWatch. It's a cool technology, not something that we typically profile, and I'll get into that in the conversation. I introduced Catherine as interim CEO. She was at the time. She's COO now. She was both when I interviewed her. Now she's COO. But let's hear from Jaclyn Lautz. Again, she's Chief Operating Officer at ivWatch. Well, Jaclyn Lautz, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tom.
Nice to have you here. Nice to hear about ivWatch. This isn't a type of technology that we focus a lot on in DeviceTalks, so it's an area we want to look at. I know you had some positive news lately. So talk a bit about ivWatch. What is the problem that came to lead you and lead ivWatch to develop the solution that we'll learn about in a moment?
Yeah, sure. So we are solving a global problem, just like you and your friends and family have all probably received an IV at some point in time. About 90% of folks that go into a hospital are getting an IV, and there's over 2 billion IVs that are placed annually globally, which is a really high volume.
Sure.
And so when you think about IVs and how important they are to deliver the drug to the patient or the fluid, there's actually a really common problem where it can leak outside of the vein for various reasons, whether the catheter backs out, punctures through, or there could be porosity changes in the vein. It's a very common problem globally, and really depending on the drug, it can cause everything from some harm with pain and swelling to even permanent damage like tissue injury, and in extreme cases, amputation.
Wow.
And so this is a common problem. It's global, and it's also something that there's no other product like it on the market. Current standard of practice is actually nurses coming in and doing routine assessments of the IV site. So they'll touch, they'll look, compare, they'll use some of their clinical tools to assess the IV site. But unfortunately, because they're routine checks every hour, every 4 hours, depending on what the protocol is, also they're detecting it when the injury has already started to progress and has
Uh-huh.
already happened. And so you think about that and how busy the nurses are in today's world. There's really a need for a product or technology that can actually provide continuous monitoring. So that's where ivWatch comes to play.
What are those signs? What are the nurses looking at? As you were introducing me to the problem, I was thinking the only real way to pick that up would be physically seeing a problem, like either the patient would pick up on it or the nurse would pick up on it. But then you mentioned that there are sort of tools and things to look at. How clear is it that there's a problem? Is it clearly like there's a kink in the line, something very visible, or does each sort of inspection require like a good couple of minutes to really get an assessment of the
Yep. So
site?
typically, what the nurses will do is, as part of their requirements, go in and look at the IV site.
Uh-huh.
So right off the bat, there, if a patient is aware, they could say, "Oh, my IV hurts," which you can imagine in a hospital setting would be uncommon because folks can be sedated.
Mhm.
If it's pediatrics or infants, they can't necessarily communicate there's pain. So when the nurse comes in and does the assessment, they're looking at the IV site. Is it swollen? Is it red? They're comparing it to, for example, if it's a IV on a hand, they're looking at both the right hand and the left hand to see if there's any swelling that's occurred. And so also they could use something like called a saline flush. They'll actually flush saline into the IV site and see if there's any pressure or pain that would
Wow. Okay.
indicate the infiltration has started. So they're very rudimentary clinical tools that are currently used standardly, but our product comes to play because we have the continuous monitoring and we detect so early that the injury has not progressed yet.
So this is clearly a hot spot or a hot area or a big need for clinical settings. I mean, there's a shortage of nurses. They're
Yeah.
overworked. They're burned out. So, and all the tools you've described, I'm guessing, have been around for
Yeah.
ever. I mean, there's
Probably
nothing.
since IVs were placed. Yeah.
Exactly. There's no real
Yep.
innovation there.
Yeah.
So,
There's no other product in the entire world that continuously monitors the IV side. Nothing else that's providing that seep out for the patient.
So we've whetted people's appetite. We've presented the problem, I think, in a really great way. What is your solution? What's ivWatch developed, and how does it work?
Yep. So, um, I already mentioned that we have a solution that provides continuous monitoring. And so you can see here, I have
No.
our sensor. And so we have a patient monitoring system. So there's a monitor cable, but really the brains of the operation is this sensor. It's disposable and it's actually placed next to an IV site. And it's an optical sensor. So it's looking at has a couple wavelengths of light
Hmm.
that come through this blue sensor head, and it's sending light. It's receiving a signal, and it's looking for specific changes underneath the tissue
Hmm.
that would indicate the drug has started to pool outside of the vein, which is really where it starts to look at the injuries starting to occur. It's early signs, but the system issues audible and visual alerts to the clinician that something is happening and you need to come do something about it.
So for those folks on the podcast who are listening, you tape the device to your wrist. It's part of a
Mhm.
sticky package, and I'd say the blue thing is what, about the size of a nickel, maybe. I mean, it's not very large.
Yep, it's very small, smaller than nickel, more like a dime
Hmm.
size, and it's very flexible. So, I mean, I'm placing it on my hand here, but you can imagine a very small patient, maybe a preemie baby. Our sensor is very flexible, and the format you can wrap it around very small limbs so that you have the protection on there to check for what's going on.
So what is it looking at again, and how is it getting the information to the healthcare provider so they can
Mhm.
come and address a problem if there is one?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there's a couple wavelengths of light in the sensor, and it's sending light and it's receiving back. And there's it's looking for optical changes in the tissue. So there's specific changes that happen underneath that tissue as the drug or the fluid starts to leak into the tissue.
Uh-huh.
And so our algorithm looks for a variety of parameters and factors, but when it starts to determine that the leakage is starting to occur, it's early signs, and it will issue both an audible and visual notification to the clinician to then come to the IV site. And what we find with customers that are most successful with the product and see the most positive outcomes is when they have very strong protocols on how to use IV Watch. What do you do when there's the red alert that has occurred? And so that they are having the positive outcomes with the product.
Amazing. So where are you in development and approval in commercialization? What's your
Yep.
status?
So we have 2 sensors that are in market. One, the sensor that I talked about, the disposable sensor. We have our FDA clearance and also CE mark. We have approval to sell into 16 countries. We've been in the US for several years, so we're in market. We have key accounts that have implemented the technology and are seeing positive impacts, not just from a clinical standpoint, because you know in the hospital setting, everybody will agree with you want to improve patient safety, you want to improve patient outcomes. But then there's also the economic side where our product reduces the costs of these injuries. Anything from it could be just the extended stay required, the extra nursing time, to extreme cases. Perhaps there was an amputation and a major lawsuit.
Interesting. So what has the reception been from healthcare providers? I have to think this is you certainly get some phone calls returned, I would imagine.
Yeah, so it's very positive. I think no matter what hospital or healthcare system you're talking to, um, this problem exists. There is
Uh-huh.
no hospital in the world that does not have infiltration extravasation. So I think when we're thinking about the customer and hospitals and healthcare systems, having that clinical solution is a no-brainer. The next part of that is really we don't just provide a product, we're also looking at best practice. So how do you best keep track of these types of events? How do you improve your clinical practices to improve that? So it's been very positive because there's nothing else in the world that can provide this extra layer of safety.
That's amazing. So looking forward, what do you see for the future of IV technology? I have to think that this is a real not only a clinical need, but it's probably a real pain point for healthcare providers. I imagine that technology like this is going to make that whole process, I would hope, a little more, a little easier in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think Over the past several years, I mean, healthcare is moving to more a proactive prevention versus a reactive approach. So,
Mhm.
where we are clinically with IV monitoring is very reactive. It's very reactive when the injury has already occurred or the patient is already in the state of harm. And so ivWatch, we're really aligning to where the market is going with a proactive preventative approach. I mean, these types of events are preventable. And so our vision as a company is there really should be no patient that suffers from these preventable types of events. And with the right technology like ivWatch, that's possible. So that's where things are going for the market.
Fantastic. Well, it's a great MedTech story, a huge problem that I'm sure many people listening can connect to. And Jaclyn Lautz, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It was nice chatting today.